Why did Jesus Christ come from the tribe of Judah? If you look at the 12 sons of Jacob, God's choice makes absolutely no sense. By every ancient law, the royal bloodline should have gone to Reuben, the firstborn and legal heir. By every moral standard, it should have gone to Joseph, the chosen, perfect son. But God bypassed the legal heir. He bypassed the moral hero. Instead, he handed the eternal crown to the fourth son, Judah, a man who shattered his family and sold his own brother into slavery for pieces of silver. Why would God entrust the salvation of the world to the brother with the darkest past? The answer will change how you understand grace forever. To understand why Judah was chosen, you must first understand what was at stake and who the other candidates were. This requires stepping into a world where inheritance was not merely financial, it was cosmic. God had made a covenant with a man named Abraham. Not a general promise, not a vague spiritual blessing, but a formal, binding agreement with specific terms. Through Abraham's biological descendants, every family on earth would be blessed. The Messiah, the one who would ultimately redeem humanity, was going to come through one specific, unbroken bloodline. Every generation that passed added urgency to the question, which line, which son, which family? Abraham passed the covenant to Isaac. Isaac passed it to Jacob, though not without significant controversy. Jacob had obtained his father's blessing through deception, stealing it from his older brother Esau. The covenant arrived in Jacob's hands, carrying the weight of its own complicated history. And now Jacob had 12 sons, and the covenant needed to move forward through one of them. In the ancient Near East, the mechanism for this transfer was not a mystery. It was the law of primogeniture, one of the oldest and most ironclad legal frameworks in human civilization. The firstborn son was not simply first in birth order. He occupied an almost sacred position within the family structure. He received the double portion of the family wealth. He inherited the spiritual authority of his father. He became the legal head of the family clan upon his father's death. The birthright carried everything, material, spiritual, and covenantal. And it was the most valuable inheritance any human being could possess. But there was something else operating beneath the legal surface of Jacob's household, something more volatile than law. Jacob had 4 wives and 12 sons, and the household was fractured along a fault line that ran directly through the heart of the family. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah were all sons of Leah. The wife Jacob had been tricked into marrying, the wife he never chose, the wife the text describes with devastating plainness as unloved. Joseph and Benjamin were the sons of Rachel. The beautiful wife Jacob had worked 14 years to marry, the wife he loved from the moment he saw her at a well. This favoritism was not subtle. Jacob gave Joseph a coat of many colors, while the other brothers wore common garments. He treated Rachel's sons as though they were inherently more valuable. He spoke about them differently. He protected them differently. The sons of Leah grew up watching their father love another woman's children more than he loved them, and that wound quietly poisoned everything that followed. The legal candidate for the covenant was clear: the firstborn son of the household, the son who held the birthright by law, by custom, and by the logic of everything the ancient world understood about inheritance. His name was Reuben. He held the destiny of the entire messianic promise in his hands. We must now look carefully at what he did with that privilege. Reuben knew what he carried. He was the firstborn of Jacob, the legal heir to the double portion, the spiritual authority, and the covenant leadership of the family. If the Messiah was going to come through one of Jacob's sons, Reuben was the obvious, expected, legally mandated choice. There was no ambiguity. There was no competition. The inheritance was his. And then, in a single act recorded in one sentence in Genesis chapter 35, he destroyed it. Reuben slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine. The text states it plainly and moves on. But the ancient reader would have understood immediately that this was not simply a moral failure. In the ancient Near East, taking a man's concubine was a specific, deliberate act of political usurpation. It was the ancient equivalent of seizing the throne. When a man took his father's concubine, he was making a public declaration. The old authority is finished. I am the head of this family now. This was not an act of weakness or passion alone. It was a power move. Centuries later, King David's son Absalom would repeat this exact act during his military coup, publicly sleeping with his father's concubines on the rooftop of the palace in view of all Israel. Every person in the ancient world who heard that story understood what it meant. Reuben was doing the same thing. He was announcing his own supremacy before his time, before his father was finished, before God had made any such determination. Jacob heard what happened. His response was silence. Not a word. For years the wound sat buried in the household, unacknowledged, festering beneath the surface of daily life. The silence was not forgiveness. It was a suspended sentence. Jacob was not the kind of man who forgot. He was the kind of man who waited. 20 years later, Jacob is dying. He gathers his 12 sons around his deathbed and begins to speak over each one. When he arrives at Reuben, the suspended sentence is finally delivered. He acknowledges the privilege first. You are my firstborn, my strength, the first sign of my vigor, excelling in honor, excelling in power. And then comes the verdict. Turbulent as the waters, you will not excel, for you went up onto your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it. 3 words end everything. You will not excel. The man who held the eternal covenant in his hands surrendered it for a single night of political arrogance. The scepter moves. The second and third sons now stand in line. Simeon and Levi were sons 2 and 3. By the brutal arithmetic of ancient inheritance law, Reuben's disqualification moved the covenant birthright to them. They were next, and what they did with that position was not a moral failure in a moment of weakness. It was a calculated, methodical, cold-blooded act that disqualified them on an entirely different level than Reuben. Jacob's daughter Dinah went out to visit the women of the land. The prince of Shechem, a powerful local ruler named after his city, saw her. He seized her. He violated her. And then, in a display of entitlement that staggers the mind, he sent his father to negotiate a marriage contract as though the assault were simply an awkward opening to a business arrangement. Jacob heard what had happened. He said nothing, waiting for his sons to return from the fields. Simeon and Levi arrived. They did not explode. They did not attack immediately. They were filled with a cold, controlled fury that expressed itself not in rage, but in calculation. They negotiated. They told Shechem and his father that they could not possibly give their sister to an uncircumcised man. It would be a disgrace. But they proposed a solution. If every man in the city of Shechem underwent circumcision, the families could unite. They would intermarry, share land, share wealth, and become one people. Shechem, besotted and confident, agreed immediately. He convinced every man in his city to submit to the procedure. On the 3rd day, when every man in Shechem was in the most acute, debilitating pain of his life, Simeon and Levi walked through the city gates. Each man had a sword. They moved through the streets of Shechem and killed every single man in the city. Then they looted everything: the women, the children, the flocks, the herds, the silver. Every possession the city contained was taken. What makes this disqualifying is not merely the scale of the violence, it is what they used to accomplish it. They weaponized circumcision, the sacred physical sign of God's covenant with Abraham, the mark that set the people of God apart from every nation, as a tactical instrument of mass murder. They turned the most holy symbol in their family's covenant history into a trap. This was not just brutality. This was blasphemy. Jacob's response to his sons was immediate and visceral. "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and Perizzites." His deathbed verdict 20 years later carried the full theological weight of what they had done. "Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury, so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel." Sons 2 and 3 are gone. No ceremony, no appeal, just the permanent record of what they chose to do with the position they were given. The inheritance now falls entirely to the fourth son. And here is where the story becomes deeply uncomfortable. Because Judah was not a better man than his brothers, he was about to prove it in ways that would follow him for the rest of his life. The story of Judah's failures does not arrive as a single dramatic collapse. It accumulates, layer by layer, across years. The picture of a man who repeatedly chooses the wrong thing builds into something almost unbearable to look at directly. And yet, we must look at it, because without understanding how far down Judah went, we cannot understand the magnitude of what happened to him afterward. The first failure is the one history remembers most. Joseph, 17 years old, is thrown into a pit by his brothers who intend to kill him. Judah looks at his terrified younger brother and speaks, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites."
20 pieces of silver. He commodifies his own flesh and blood. He turns a human being into a transaction, and then he goes home with his brothers, watches them dip Joseph's coat in goat's blood, and stands in the room while his father Jacob tears his own garments and weeps over a son he believes is dead. Judah knows the boy is alive. He says nothing. Not that day. Not for the next 20 years. The silence is the second failure. It extends across 2 decades of watching his father grieve. Every time Jacob mentioned Joseph, every time the old man picked up the grief again and carried it through another season, Judah was in possession of the truth that could have ended it. He chose to keep it. The weight of that silence was not hidden from him. It was the ground he walked on every single day. Then comes Genesis chapter 38, which opens with a line that functions almost as a verdict in itself. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam. He separates from the covenant family entirely. He moves away from his father's household and marries a Canaanite woman, walking directly away from everything his grandfather Abraham had built his entire life around. His oldest son, is wicked, and God takes his life. His second son, Onan, is wicked, and God takes his life as well. Under the ancient law of Levirate marriage, Judah is now obligated to give his third son, Shelah, to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, so the family line can continue. He deliberately withholds Shelah, telling Tamar to wait until the boy is grown, while having no intention of following through. He is legally sentencing a widow to slow destitution and social erasure. Tamar understands what he has done. She acts. She removes her widow's garments, covers herself with a veil, and sits at a crossroads on the road Judah is traveling. He does not recognize her. He approaches her. He sleeps with her, leaving his personal seal, his cord, and his staff as a pledge of payment. These were not small objects. They were the equivalent of his identity documents and the symbol of his tribal authority. He surrendered them carelessly for 20 minutes of dark gratification, treating the symbol of his entire authority like a transaction he could afford to forget. When Tamar is discovered to be pregnant, Judah reacts with the full force of public moral authority. Bring her out and burn her to death. He is calling for the execution of a woman for a sin he himself committed with her 3 months earlier. Tamar steps forward and produces the seal, the cord, and the staff. She is pregnant by the man who owns these. The hypocrisy collapses in public, and Judah, to his credit, and this matters, does not deny it. She is more righteous than I, he says. It is the first crack. It is the first moment where the man who has spent years concealing his failures finally admits one out loud. He said nothing when Joseph went into the pit. He said nothing while his father wept. But here, with his own objects of authority held up as evidence against him, he tells the truth. That admission will cost him his reputation. What it gives him eventually is something far more significant. God uses a famine to do what 20 years of ordinary life could not accomplish. A 7-year drought descends on the entire region. The only grain available in the known world is stored in Egypt, controlled by a mysterious and powerful viceroy whose identity no one in Jacob's family suspects. The viceroy is Joseph. The brother Judah sold for 20 pieces of silver is now the second most powerful man on earth, and the family that destroyed him is about to walk through his door asking for food. The brothers travel to Egypt and bow before Joseph, fulfilling the dream that had made them hate him in the first place. Joseph recognizes them immediately. They do not recognize him at all. He tests them. He accuses them of being spies. He keeps Simeon as a hostage and sends the others home with grain, insisting they must return with their youngest brother Benjamin, Rachel's last living son, before he will deal with them again. Jacob refuses. He has already lost Joseph. He has watched Simeon remain in an Egyptian prison for months. He will not risk Benjamin. The sons of Leah watch their father choose Rachel's absent son over Simeon rotting in a cell, and the old wound opens again exactly as it always has. Finally, with the family starving and no other option remaining, Judah steps forward. He does not ask his father. He makes a guarantee. I will be surety for him. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. The man who once sold a brother is now personally guaranteeing the safety of the brother his father loves most. The same man who chose profit over protection is now putting his entire future on the line to protect the son of the woman who was always valued above his own mother. They return to Egypt with Benjamin. Joseph receives them, eats with them, and then, in the final movement of his test, plants his personal silver cup in Benjamin's grain sack and sends the brothers on their way. When the cup is discovered, all the brothers are brought back to Joseph's throne room. The verdict is delivered with surgical precision. You are all free to go. Only the man with the cup will remain as my slave, Benjamin, the youngest, the one Jacob cannot lose, the one Judah guaranteed. What happens next is one of the most important moments in the entire Old Testament, and it is almost never discussed with the weight it deserves. For a moment, no one moves. 10 men stand in the most powerful throne room on earth, and the silence is the kind that precedes either surrender or transformation. Then Judah steps forward. He begins to speak. He addresses this foreign ruler, this man who holds absolute power over all of them, and he does not argue for Benjamin's innocence. He does not challenge the evidence. He tells a story. He explains that their father is an old man, and that the boy's life is bound up with the old man's life. and that if the boy does not return, their father will die of grief. He explains the guarantee he made. He explains that he personally cannot return to his father without the boy. And then he says the words that fracture the entire room. "Now therefore, please let your servant remain here as a slave to my lord in place of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers." This is the same man who said, "Let us sell him to the Ishmaelites." The same man who watched his father grieve for 2 decades and said nothing. The same man who threw his staff in the dirt on a roadside, who surrendered everything he was for something worth nothing. That man is now standing in a foreign throne room, voluntarily surrendering his freedom to protect the son his father loves more than he was ever loved himself. This is not improvement. This is not gradual moral progress. This is something closer to death and rebirth inside a single human being. This is the first substitutionary atonement recorded in Scripture. The pattern of what his descendant Jesus would do on a Roman cross, standing in the place of the condemned, absorbing the consequence they could not bear, is written here, centuries before Calvary, by a broken man who finally became who he was always meant to be. Joseph cannot hold himself together. He clears the room of every Egyptian attendant, and then he weeps. The text says he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him in the next corridor, and word reached Pharaoh's household. When he finally speaks, the words he chooses are the most dramatic self-revelation in the Bible. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers cannot answer him. They are too terrified to speak. And Joseph, the man they betrayed, reaches across 22 years of slavery and imprisonment and says, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." The family is healed. But there is one final scene remaining, one old man lying on a bed in Egypt who has one last, world-altering declaration to make about the 4th son. Jacob is 147 years old, and he knows he is dying. He calls his 12 sons to his bedside and speaks over each one. What he delivers is not sentimental farewell. It is prophetic declaration. Each blessing or curse, a precise assessment of what each son's life has revealed about his character, and what that character means for his descendants. He arrives at Reuben. "Unstable as water, you will not excel." The verdict delivered 20 years after the crime, unchanged by time. He speaks of Simeon and Levi together. "Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury, so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel." No ceremony, no softening, just the permanent record of Shechem. Sons 1, 2, and 3 are passed over without apology. Then Jacob looks at the 4th son, the man with the longest list of failures in the room. And he speaks a blessing so specific, so structurally precise, so prophetically loaded, that Jewish and Christian scholars have studied it for 3,000 years without exhausting its implications. "Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down before you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. From the prey, my son, you have gone up." He crouches down. He stretches out like a lion, like a lioness. Who dares to rouse him? Then come the words that lock the messianic bloodline forever. "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his." Consider the object Jacob names, the ruler's staff. Consider the object Jacob names, the ruler's staff, the same object Judah carelessly surrendered on a roadside to pay for a transaction he should never have entered. The symbol of his authority that he treated as something he could afford to lose. God takes that exact object, the staff, the scepter, the symbol of the authority Judah abandoned, and declares that it will never leave his lineage again, not until the one it was always meant for finally arrives to claim it. The phrase, "until he to whom it belongs shall come," is a direct messianic prophecy. The scepter remains in Judah's tribe until the ultimate king, the heir for whom the entire lineage was a preparation, finally appears. Scholars across centuries, both Jewish and Christian, have recognized in this verse a forward-pointing promise whose fulfillment requires a specific person, at a specific time, from a specific family. Joseph received the double portion of blessing. He received the providence of nations, the preservation of an entire civilization, and a legacy that fills 14 chapters of Genesis. But the scepter was never his to carry. The royal authority, the messianic line, the eternal throne, those were not given to the son Jacob loved most. They were given to the son who learned, through the longest and most painful road in the family, what it actually costs to lay your life down for another. That lineage moves forward. Through Perez, the son born from the Tamar incident that should have destroyed Judah's legacy entirely. Through Boaz, the man of Bethlehem who redeemed a foreign woman named Ruth. Through Jesse. Through David, the shepherd king to whom God would make a second, even more specific promise. Through Solomon. Through the royal line of Jerusalem. And the line does not stay comfortable or unbroken. It is tested at every generation, tested most severely at the moment of greatest imperial threat. The Davidic covenant, recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 7, narrows the promise further than Jacob's blessing alone. God appears to the prophet Nathan with a message for David: "Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever." This is the second lock on the messianic bloodline. The covenant is no longer simply within the tribe of Judah. It is within a single royal family inside that tribe, and it carries the word forever. The promise has become architectural. It has an address. In 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon besieged Jerusalem, burned the temple to the ground, dismantled the Davidic monarchy, and carried the royal family into captivity in Babylon. By every observable standard of ancient history, this should have been the end. Empires that destroyed the institutions of a conquered people were destroying their future. The Babylonians knew this. It was strategy, not accident. If there is no temple, no throne, and no royal house, there is no covenant continuity. The line should have died in Babylon. It did not die. The genealogies in the first chapter of Matthew and the third chapter of Luke both trace the messianic lineage through the exile with specific names, in specific order, across the 70 years of Babylonian captivity and the centuries of Persian, Greek, and Roman occupation that followed. The thread did not break. Scholars remain divided on the precise historical reconstruction of certain names in those genealogies, and that debate is legitimate and unresolved. What is not in dispute is the structural claim both gospel writers are making. The Davidic line, the line of Judah, survived everything the ancient world threw at it. Matthew traces the legal line through Joseph, establishing the royal credentials of Jesus within the framework of Jewish law. Luke traces the biological line, which most scholars identify as running through Mary. Both lines converge on David. Both lines converge on Judah. Two independent genealogical witnesses arriving at the same tribe, the same royal house, the same covenant promise that Jacob spoke over his fourth son in Egypt thousands of years before Bethlehem existed. The prophet Micah, writing 7 centuries before the birth of Jesus, named the town. "But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel. whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. The angel who appeared to the shepherds that night named the lineage. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. The town of David, the city within the territory of Judah. Everything the prophecy required was present and verified simultaneously. The precision of this fulfillment is not a minor detail. It is the entire argument. A lineage traced through one specific tribe out of 12, through one specific family within that tribe, through one specific town named by a prophet 700 years in advance, surviving political collapse, imperial exile, and 70 years of captivity.
That is not the kind of thing that happens by accumulation of coincidence. It either means something or it means nothing at all. What it cannot be is merely interesting. Why did Jesus descend from the tribe of Judah and not from another son of Jacob? The surface answer is legal and prophetic. Reuben disqualified himself through an act of political arrogance. Simeon and Levi disqualified themselves through an act of sacrilegious violence. The scepter fell to the fourth son by elimination. Jacob's blessing locked it there by divine declaration. The Davidic covenant locked it further by specific promise. The genealogies confirmed it by historical record. The prophet Micah confirmed it by geographic specificity. And Bethlehem confirmed it by geography at the moment of birth. That is the legal answer, and it is complete. But there is a deeper answer beneath the legal one, and it is the answer this story has been building toward from the moment Judah looked at his brother in the pit and said those words. God did not root the Messiah through Judah's line despite Judah's failures. He routed it through that line because of what those failures produced. Because a man who has never fallen does not know what it costs to get up. Because a man who has never sold someone he should have protected does not understand what it means to stand in the place of the condemned. Because the substitutionary moment in Genesis 44, Judah offering himself as a slave to protect the son his father loved more, could only have been spoken by a man who understood from the inside what it means to have done the opposite. Tamar appears in Matthew's genealogy. God was so committed to the integrity of this story that when Matthew opens the New Testament with the lineage of Jesus Christ, he names her, not to hide the scandal, to display it, to place it on page 1 of the Christian scriptures as a permanent declaration. This is the kind of story I tell. This is the kind of person I work through. The broken, the exposed, the man whose staff ended up in the dirt, the woman the law tried to burn. The 5 women Matthew names in that genealogy are not there by accident. They are a theological statement about the nature of the bloodline itself. God did not choose a clean lineage and protect it from contamination. He chose a human lineage and redeemed it at every point of failure. The scandal is not incidental to the story. The scandal is the point. What is the thing in your past? The pit moment, the Genesis 38 moment, the moment you walked away from everyone who needed you, that you have decided permanently disqualifies you from being used by God? The Lion of Judah did not descend from a perfect bloodline. He chose the broken one. He descended through the disqualified fourth son, not in spite of what that son did, because of what that son became. And he did it on purpose, to say something that cannot be said any other way. I did not come for the firstborns. I did not come for the ones who never fell. I came for the ones who sold their brothers, abandoned their families, threw their staff in the dirt, and lived for years under the weight of things they could not undo. I came to do exactly what Judah did for Benjamin in that throne room in Egypt, to stand in your place. If this investigation has opened something in you that you want to keep following, subscribe to Bible Origins for new revelation every single week.